As promised, a little time for questions, although we've already done some. Anything's popped up other than apple strudel? Should be fine. So where we're at today in the Eightfold Path is on the ethics portion, really. It's right speech, right action, right livelihood. And collectively, these three make up really the foundation of spiritual path. No foundation, there's no spiritual path. And so this is something to never be underestimated. And we really want to approach this ethical piece of the path in a way of a fuller context. So it's not a list of rules, do this, don't do that. It's much more rich in terms of how does this really cultivate a path for us? How does this help us remove suffering in our life? How does this help us to see clearly? How does this create the conditions for life that's meaningful? And so as Aaron brought up, at the very start of this path, we've got the truth of suffering. And, we use the word suffering a lot, but, dukkha is the word which is more unsatisfactoriness. That there's really nothing in this lifetime that we're going to find truly satisfying. It's the nature of our life. We're born, we're going to age, we're going to get sick, we're going to die. Sounds like fun, doesn't it? And this sense of this unsatisfactoriness is the quest that the Buddha went on. Is this necessary? Is this truly necessary? And he observed this truth of dukkha, this truth of unsatisfactoriness. And the question was, there's these three types that we talk about. And one is pretty obvious. When we think about suffering, we call it the suffering of suffering. It's pain. If if I fall on my bike and break my ribs, it's going to hurt. If someone breaks up with me, it's going to hurt. That we have emotional pain, we have physical pain. It happens. It's called the suffering of suffering. It's just natural pain. It's part of being human. You stub your toe, it's going to hurt. And there's nothing particularly Buddhist about that. It's just suffering of suffering. But it's the nature of our existence. And that's the thing I think that's critical to get to, is we often think it shouldn't be. See, I shouldn't fall and break my ribs. I shouldn't stub my toe. My girlfriend shouldn't break up with me. I shouldn't have this pain. My friend should not get cancer. And when these things happen, we're ill prepared for them, because somewhere in my mind it says, that shouldn't happen, and I don't want it to happen. And so on that level, we really have to understand that pervasively there's a lot of pain in this world. The fact that there's a lot of pain in this world doesn't mean you have to suffer, though, which is an interesting piece that we'll get to. So on one level, we can see that. The second level is the suffering of change. Things that provide us happiness transform into the seeds of dukkha, of unsatisfactoriness. There's seeds of unsatisfactoriness in everything outside of ourselves that gives us any pleasure. It's all there. The seed of my suffering. And, the analogy I use all the time is, we spend all this time in our lives seeking happiness with the house, the car, the relationship, the job, our friends. And what do we worry and stress over? The house, the car, the job, the relationship, the friends. That cup of coffee, if it's really good, we can enjoy it. But if I'm really attached to it, I need that coffee a certain way. I got a friend of mine, when you go to his house, it's a 10-minute process. He's got his coffee, only one cup at a time. He's got the little filter, and he'll put some on, he sprinkles a little water, then he puts a little more coffee on, then sprinkles a little more, and lets it, just come through just so, have his cup of coffee. It's more ritual. And that's a beautiful thing. It's a nice thing. There's nothing wrong with it. But often then, if we get really attached to a cup of coffee being like this, every other cup of coffee, it's going to be unsatisfying. And I used to travel with a monk. He's great. This guy is a character. Incredible powers, I think, sometimes. This guy would blow my mind. But Starbucks Italian roast coffee. It's the only fair trade one they have. Like, well, I think they have a couple, but it's the one you can always find. That's the cup of coffee for him. Everything else to him is dirty water. And he would just see it, you know. You give him a cup of coffee. I went and I tried to buy him some Starbucks. They didn't have the Italian roast. I asked these guys, you know, what's the next closest thing? They gave me this, and he, you know, and you know, he's waiting for the Starbucks, and I come back with this other thing of, I forget, it was some Ethiopian blend or something. And you know, he just looks at me, and you can just see I have let him down. And he's a big guy too, and I'm like, guy told me it's really good. So we brewed it all up for him, and he just, oh, you call this coffee? You know, it's just, you know, just wasn't gonna do. And so when we think about how much pleasure does coffee give us, well, here's another coffee. It doesn't give us much pleasure. You know, a friend of mine, I often talk about, had lived most of her life being of service, living in retreat, doing travels and helping out for her religious missionary service and so forth. And she's in her late 30s, and she finally, for the first time, really got her own apartment. Her own apartment. She lived in a lot of places. She lived, you know, in the Appalachians. She's done work in South America. She's been in India. She got her apartment, and she was talking to me on the phone about she was really nervous about getting to bed. Like, at this point, she could sleep on anything. But she noticed that people with really nice beds can't sleep on other beds. And she was really in this quandary time, and I could relate because at that time I had been traveling for like 4 years. You know, I could sleep on anything. And I actually I didn't realize you could spend thousands of dollars on a bed. But you can, and they have all kinds of beds, and they're, you know, climate controlled and therapeutic and all this stuff you can do. You can make this half the bed different than that. And she was like, do I get a nice, like she didn't want to get a bed because she saw how other people suffered when they're not in their bed, you know. And you go to, and she knew she'd still have to travel. So I don't know what she did. I should follow up, see what she went with. But in this suffering of change, the things that bring us pleasure contain the seeds of suffering, and everything that brings you pleasure in this sense will transition to suffering. You know, no matter who you love, no matter how long they've been in your life, they're going to leave you, and it's going to hurt one way or another. The things that we really grab onto when we don't have it or when we lose it, and has the suffering. And also, even if we don't lose it, it just gets suffering. If, you know, the constant analogy that they use in Tibetan Buddhism is your favorite song, right? Play that 1,000 times a day. See how much you like it, right? Oh my God, not again. But it never gets old when I sing it home, does it? I get stuck on one thing over and over. And I don't even know the words. Like, I know like 2 verses. Over and over. Food. First taste, really delicious. Second taste, you know, first piece of apple strudel, really good. Second piece of apple strudel, third piece, you know, it's getting old. I can't even fill up. The same thing that brings us pleasure transforms. So it's suffering of change. These things change. And in it, the qualities of happiness are not there. The third is this more pervasive, the nature of samsaric existence is the nature of unsatisfactoriness itself, and dukkha. And that just means the nature of our life and how we experience it is just rife with unsatisfaction. We're all going to age. We're all going to get sick. We're all going to die. There's no way around that. There's no way around the conditioned aspects of ourselves, and we're not going to find anything in this samsaric, and by samsaric, cyclical conditioned existence that we live in, that's going to provide you any lasting happiness. It's just not there. It's nowhere out there. And that was really the big find. You know, that the third level is where Buddhism starts to really look at something and say, you know, it's just not out there. And the question is, can we get rid of this? Can we not suffer? Can we transcend dukkha? And that has been his journey. And when he achieved this liberation, which is beyond conditioned existence, beyond karmic imprint, to full Buddhahood, he said, well, here's the path. And so we got the truth of the suffering, the cause of it, and the cause being rooted in the three poisons, the three root delusions, which is a grasping on the self that's not accurate, attachment and aversion. And so again, my attachment is going to create a lot of karma, and my aversion, often they'll say greed and like hatred. I like attachment and aversion because it's just, you know, I don't like that and I like that, and I create a lot of karma. But technically aversion's an attachment, isn't it? I'm very attached to not being around that. Right? So really it's all a sense of that. So there's a sense of this aversion of sort of an anger, you know, a hostility type thing. But because I really feel that John is the most important thing in the world, and that John exists very independent of all of you, I wake up every day looking for what's good for me. What do I like and what do I don't like? And I just spend my whole life trying to find happiness and trying to avoid suffering. And I do it in a way that has no relationship to the way the world actually is, and that creates all the suffering. A misperception of me, a misperception of how things look out there, and a desire to grab on to things that I think will make me happy and try to avoid things that won't. And I just create nothing but karma, you know, all over the place. And the root of this karma, when we look at whether it's wholesome or unwholesome, has to do is it grounded in these three delusions, three root delusions? Or is it grounded in our right view? Our right view. And we'll get to that piece. So we have this conditioned existence, and there's a lot of suffering that's really ultimately unnecessary in life. Just unnecessary. Pain is not unnecessary. That's a different thing. So when I'm talking about this dukkha or unsatisfaction, I'm not talking about pain. Pain is something that actually provides us some fuel for our path, you know. And so pain tells us what to look at. You know, if we have a pain in our chest and we go to the doctor, if I, you know, hurt my knee, I know what to look at. Spiritually and emotionally, we suffer a lot with some pain. And so there's pain that's normal and necessary. Suffering's a whole different thing. Suffering is I don't want the pain. Suffering is I think things should be different than they are. Suffering is rife with mental delusions around the sense of pride, jealousy, resentment, anger, you know, these types of mental afflictions that arise. And those are not necessary. They're not necessary. And so as we get to these ultimate levels, we can start to see how we can reduce the suffering. There was a monk, I heard a talk, he gave it with high school students. Not high school, I think it was middle school. And he was talking about suffering and pain. And this little, young girl said, so I think I get it. Suffering is when you don't want the pain. And that's an interesting way of looking at it. Suffering is I think things should be different than they are, in a sense. You know, when you really think about my mental suffering, it's I think things should be different than they are. I shouldn't get cancer. I mean, I understand a lot of other people get it, but, you know, not me, not my best friend. You know, it's like we see this world and here's the way it works for everybody else except me. Because in my world, my friends don't get sick, my relationships last, I stay healthy, and I'm going to live to X amount of years. and my car is going to start all the time. Good luck. Right? But we do. We have this interesting piece in our world, and it doesn't work like that. That's where the suffering arises. I think it should be different. So out of this misperception of reality, of the nature of life, we create a lot of suffering. So I said, well, the cause of suffering, these sort of three roots, and there's, in Tibetan Buddhism, we talk about 84,000, but, three root. Easier to remember three. I've never seen the list of 84,000, so you just have to take their word for it. So we've got truth of suffering, cause of suffering, cessation of suffering. If there's no cause, there's no result. So the cessation says if we eliminate the cause of my suffering, we can be liberated. And then the Eightfold Path liberates us. And this is the path to really find liberation from conditioned existence. Within that, then, is the guidelines of ethics, concentration, and wisdom. The foundation's ethics. That's where we're at today. The foundation being ethics. The foundation of all spiritual growth. And it's not just in Buddhism. You're going to find this rich in other traditions. Is ethical behavior, moral behavior. And in the Tibetan tradition, or actually all Buddhist tradition, I just keep saying Tibetan because that's my training, but in all of Buddhist tradition, ethical behavior is not defined as a sort of ultimate right and wrong, not a good and a bad. It's much more characterized by unwholesome and wholesome, virtuous and non-virtuous. There's no one looking over us saying, you did this. You did it to yourself. It's literally, if something's wholesome, that means you are doing things that are conducive to your spiritual growth, that are beneficial in the world, that are going to create pleasure in your own life and well-being. That's what wholesome is. The result is that. Unwholesome is, it's not conducive to your spiritual growth. It's going to create some suffering in your life. It's not beneficial to the world. So when we're looking at ethical behavior, we're looking at behaving in a way that is going to be actually literally conducive to my spiritual growth, to my inner well-being, beneficial to the world that I live in. That's ethical. And from this, I create all the conditions from which I can grow. And if we use the analogy that we've been working with is that we all have Buddha nature, our nature of mind, the absolute nature. And this is verifiable, really. It's not anything you need to take on faith. It's been replicated for thousands of years, many, many times, is when people go into meditation and they dissolve the really conceptual mind, the sense consciousnesses. We've got all of our busyness of mind, but actually all sense consciousness of hearing and sound and feeling. And that withdraws into just your pure awareness, your awareness itself. That is just consisting of bliss, luminosity, and non-conceptuality. That's your natural state of being. Blissful, luminous, and non-conceptual. And that's right, you can find that. Now on top of, and that's not even enlightenment. That's just, that's just your natural state of mind in a conditioned existence. That's your stream of consciousness from life to life. That's not enlightenment. A lot of people tend to think it is. They actually achieve that and they say, I'm enlightened. The non-dual nature of everything, blissful and all that. And then they're out of meditation and they're getting angry and frustrated and resentful. That's a vacation. An important one to be sure. It's a sense of, a more true sense of how things are. But that's our nature. Now on top of that, due to my sense consciousnesses of taking an image and feelings and thoughts and my own karma is on top of that nature. It's like a dirty windshield. And it doesn't allow me to see things as they are. I view everything through a lens of karmic imprints and kleshas, and my experience of the world is viewed through this very thick and dense way of habituated thinking, of karma, of kleshas, and my perception of others and my experience of them is all defined literally by how I've lived my life previously. So how I experience you, how I experience whether I like coffee or don't like coffee, or whatever it is that I'm participating in, whether I think somebody's a jerk, whether I think that car is really cool and somebody else thinks that car is kind of not cool. The car's not either of those things. The coffee's not good or bad. The whole world we experience is subjective and relational, and as you change your karma, your experience of it changes. So it's just this foggy, muddy windshield. And if we start then entering into the path in the sense of cultivating ethical behavior, what we're going to do is start cleaning our windshield. We're going to start clearing away some of the fogginess and the misperception of how I see things. I can be a little more clear. I'm going to have a calmer mind. I'm going to have less busyness and less distraction. And I'll be able to really be ripe for spiritual growth. But in order to act ethically, I need to, A, have where we started, which was right view. Right view is to understand the world as it is. Right view is to understand that whether I get angry or frustrated, I think that Mark's the cause of my anger, right? And Mark's not the cause of my anger. The cause of my anger, it can only be one place, right? It's here. I'm angry. Mark's just being, Mark. And whatever he does, someone might think that's a wonderful thing. Somebody else might think it's a terrible thing. Right? Somebody might get frustrated. The anger's here. It's not there. And the cause for that anger is got much more to do with how I've lived my life than anything that Mark's doing. For the record, I've never experienced anger with you. You're just a ripe example. And so more accurately understand the world, it's not that somebody made me angry, it's that I am experiencing anger arising in my life. And the condition for it might be a person, but they're not the cause. The cause is coming from my own dissatisfaction. You can't be angry if you're satisfied. You got to be dissatisfied. You got to be not content. You have to be, internally unwell. And anger typically arises. This is Western psychology, not Buddhism now. Anger typically arises. The theme of anger is when someone is thwarting you from what you want. When something or someone is blocking what you want. That's the typical theme for anger. You're being obstructed from what you want. And anger arises to remove it so I can get what I want. So there you can see where attachment's going to really buy into creating a lot of anger. And that's all coming from me. It's not the person. So if we start to understand that, and we covered in right view, there's a law of karma. There's the law of cause and effect. There's the way things work in the world. And we rarely, as human beings, are in tune with that. We just really think so-and-so's a jerk, and this coffee's delicious, and the apple strudel is wonderful, and none of that's accurate. The apple strudel I can have a pleasurable experience from because I planted the karmic seeds to have pleasurable experience from the condition that we label apple strudel is in front of me. For one piece. 2 pieces, maybe not so happy. But we think that the apple strudel is going to make me happy. And we think I'm going to be really happy if this happens, or I'm going to be really devastated if this happens. And so we just don't live in the real world most of the time. So right view is first to understand how the world works and how karma works, and that there is an impact every time I think, say, or do something. There's a movement of the mind, and it plants karmic seeds, and these seeds combine together with your karma and the karma of Carbondale and Colorado and the U.S. and the world. All this karma coming together creates the world we live in. But if I ultimately understand that, if I change me, I change my whole experience of you. and I change my experience of the world that I live in by here, not out there. So we want to have the right view first. That way we know, or we're more able to understand at least how my behaviors can be constructive and influence a life that's more meaningful and well-being. But if I keep thinking that so-and-so's a jerk, and this, if in my life would get better if this happened or if that happened, I'm looking for happiness in all the wrong places. Bad country song. And that's just generally what people do. Just being human. Because it seems like that. It really does seem like that. Doesn't it? It really seems like the apple strudel is delicious. So it's the misperception of that. So we need the right view. If we get the right view, we understand then that I'm creating through my thoughts and my speech and my actions the karmic seeds that provide the experience of my life. Well, now I'm going to be really careful about what I think, say, and do. So right intention. Okay, so if we have unwholesome karma that creates all this dukkha around craving and around aversion and grabbing on to John being the most important thing in the world, this non-changing independent thing. Well, right intention is now I want my motives, my purpose for doing things to be wrapped up in, you guys all remember the three things from last week, right? Renunciation, goodwill, and harmlessness. Now from these can arise all the good karma. So renunciation. Renunciation, again, was right to your question. Can I still enjoy my cup of coffee? Yeah, absolutely. Renunciation, though, is renouncing the delusion that the coffee is the source of my happiness. Renunciation is renouncing the deluded mind that's craving. And in this specific text, they're going to talk about craving. Renunciation being the antidote to craving. When they're talking about craving, they're talking about a grasping, delusional craving that we get into. And we have that all the time. I mean, and so renunciation, if we want to cultivate that, we want to cultivate a wise understanding of how the world is. And that's how to loosen the grip on attachment. I mean, I can tell you that attachment's going to hurt, and you can all go, yeah, I get that. Try to not be attached. Good luck, right? We can't just, oh, yeah, I had a talk, yeah, Geshe Gelsen told me attachment's a problem. I'm just going to stop being attached now. I'm good to go. And you make it about, 3 seconds out the door. Where's my car key? Where's my car? Attachment, and knowing it doesn't change it. What we need to do is cultivate a wise understanding. So we want to observe our attachment. We want to observe it. And we want to bring wisdom into it. We start to notice that there's the seeds of dukkha in these things that I'm grasping to. And I start to notice that these things I'm so driven to have can only provide me with, at best, if everything works just so, a very temporary, pleasurable experience. That's it. And it will go. And I will have spent a lot of time and energy to get that little experience. But at very best, if everything goes just the way you want it and intended, at very best, you will get a very limited pleasure of happiness. Boom. And then you'll be subject to unhappiness, right? We've all got that. I mean, you've got an award. Anybody here got an award before in your life? Yeah, I've gotten awards. After the award, were you unhappy at ever in your life? Yeah, it happened. It's weird. I got an award, and yet now a year later, I'm still unhappy sometimes. I don't know. The award's not going to do it. As a matter of fact, who's it, Dan Gilbert, that's the guy, the Harvard professor who does all the studies of happiness. A lot of their studies show that anything that's happened more than 3 months ago has very little impact on your level of happiness. Whether it's an award, whether it's a new job, whether it's, those things come and go. So the first place to really cultivate renunciation is just start paying attention. It's to wisely observe the things that we're craving, and will that really provide a lasting happiness? And how much suffering is inferred in that action and the attachment to it? And if we can do that, then we can start to lessen the grip, because we start to know that my real happiness, my real genuine well-being, the cause for pleasurable experience in my life, has much more to do with how I live my life than whether or not I get what I want. That's where it really comes from. And so that's where we want to start observing. And as we observe that, and we see that suffering, then we're cultivating wisdom. This is ultimately the wisdom that will liberate us. So this level of renunciation. But the more we crave, and here's the thing, when you crave something and what we do, what we water grows. I cannot say that enough. What you water grows. Whatever old habits we want to change, the more you do them, the more entrenched they are. The more things that I do that, whether it's whatever our thing is, what we water grows. And if we look at, we have how many hours a day that we're awake, how much of that time are we devoting to meaning in our life and a spiritual path? And how much of it is just caught up into trying to feel good and trying to avoid pain, and filled with anger, frustration, worries, resentment, jealousy. If we really want to make progress on this path, we need to devote some time to understanding the path and the meaning in our life. We need to ask ourselves every day, how can I live this life meaningfully? Here's a day that'll never come again. I need to really pull that up and know that if I were to make today my last day, if this was it, what's really important? What's really important? What's really important is how we do our practice. And for those of you that did the 7-point mind training, everything is practice. My practice is not me sitting on a cushion. I mean, that's part of it. But a much more important part of our practice is how we're dealing with the boss we can't get along with. That's from practice. That's where we really cultivate, because you could see right there what type of karmic seeds I'm getting when I'm labeling him. That idiot, he doesn't know anything. Who is he to tell me stuff? Yeah, this is when we can use practice. When we can see that they're another human being doing the best they can with what they have. Our attachment and how we see things. I was just reading one of the great teachers of our time, Lama Yeshe, on attachment. And he's making the point, as soon as we label and attach, like, that's my mom and dad, well, they should treat me a certain way because they're my mom and dad. They should have raised me like this, and they should have done this, and then boom, boom, boom. You just see these ripples of how they should treat me and what kind of parent they should be, and why I'm like this because they didn't give me this, or I'm like this because they did me this, and there's all this stuff that's attached to that. I was just at a men's retreat out in California, and 125 men. And the groups there were on fathers, on sharing about your father. And it was really profound. All these men, much of them had so much pain around their father. And not just pain necessarily. The dad might have been a good dad, and they couldn't see it. They couldn't see it. They never really respected it. They thought their dad never knew anything. And then they find out, their dad showed up every day to work. The dad did this, the dad did that. And some people, never understood. They carried guilt, by how they treated their dad. And then their dad died. And this comes into when we really think about how our emotions get in the way of being the people we want to be. This is the whole confluence of misperception. Understanding that whether it's your dad or your mom, your brother or your sister, your best friend, we have these expectations and attachments around those labels. And we forget that they're just like you. They're a human being trying to find happiness, trying to avoid suffering. And it was interesting in my group, all the pain, all the suffering, some violence, different things. Everyone to a core of those men had gotten to a point where they really, and some were crying there, that they knew that their dad had done the best that he could. And some of them found out that their dad had been abusive. Their dad, their grandfather, or their grandfather had committed suicide, or their dad, had worked since his, and they never knew that when they were alive, And what we find out is that everyone's doing the best they can with what they have. But in a misperception view, an attached sorts of way, we put a label on it, and then we think they should do this. And then how they should do this has a lot to do with what I want. And you just see it just continues to just roller coaster, which gets in the way of relationships and us finding peace and happiness and well-being, connection with others. So now if we were to come into right view where we understand our interconnection with others, and my experience of you has a lot to do with me and my expectations and my labeling and my karma. I change this, I can connect you more wisely. And my motivation being, I want to live this life meaningfully. In order to do that, we want to cultivate renunciation of delusion, renunciation of craving, of these impulses and desires that compel us to do things that we would not do. Even if you knew better, you wouldn't do it. Right? And this is a point I cannot make strong enough. Knowing it won't change it. There's 100 things you know you shouldn't do, and you do it anyway. Whether it's the fattening dessert, or calling so-and-so, or wasting this during the day, or whatever it is, or worrying. That's my favorite one. Because I always see that quote, and you'll see it everywhere. Right? Why would you worry? Is worrying ever beneficial? No. I mean, it's not. There's no logical reason to worry. If you have the resources to fix it with a problem, first off, we're worried about something that hasn't happened. Okay, if it does happen, you are able to deal with it. There's nothing to worry about. If you don't have the resources to deal with it, worrying about it won't help. It doesn't make sense to worry. Okay, so now all of you know that. Now don't worry anymore. Okay. Knowing it doesn't change it. What does change it is a deeper understanding and realization of that truth that worrying doesn't. Noting, watching yourself worry, watching your attachment to an outcome, seeing that tighten us up, seeing us respond in ways that we don't feel good, and then seeing that I worried all week about that and it never happened. And so in renunciation, the real tool, the Buddha didn't say repress your feelings. He didn't say repress these desires, whatever it is. He said observe them and cultivate a wise understanding. That's how we really cultivate renunciation, is to see how the world works. And what we're really renouncing is the delusion that these things I'm attached to are going to provide any meaning in my life. Which doesn't mean you can't go do good things or enjoy a ski run. It means enjoy the heck out of the ski run. If you got the money, the time, the resources, the best use of your day at that time, that's fine. But when you're not dealing with your home life and you're going skiing, you're lying to your employer at work to go skiing, you're doing things you don't feel good to go skiing, well, then we've got a problem. So it doesn't mean we don't enjoy life. You enjoy what's there, but you also have a much wiser view about the impulses and the cravings, so that you're not craving as much as you're enjoying what's available and what's healthy and what's well. And you enjoy the heck out of it. You can enjoy it more without the attachment of craving. And then the other piece to this is goodwill, cultivating goodwill towards others. If you are motivated that others be happy, that you want them to do well, you want them to find their inner peace and joy and meaning in life, well, that's loving kindness. That's the friendship, the connection to others. So if I have right intention, I've got the renunciation, and I'm cultivating this goodwill. And this goodwill is, I just saw a good example of how we don't do it. Ill will is we want people to get theirs. That person who's lying, I hope they get caught, or this person who did this thing, and I want them to suffer, or so-and-so, I really don't like them, and I get really happy when something happens to them, or they lose their job. Ill will, really harmful. Goodwill, loving kindness, I want you to be happy and well. Someone, a friend of mine posted on a Facebook request that someone who had killed her sister, was coming up for parole. And you could see just this whole request that people write this judge to tell him how this person should stay locked up, and her sister's life, is so much more important, and the value of her life. It needs X amount of years in prison. I think he did 11 or something already. And you could see the justification of that, right? But what if this person has done 11 years, is making change in their life? Would it be better to wish them to be well and a good member of society? Or do we want to suffer because I lost my sister? What do we really want to do? I've got friends in my life who have killed people and who have done prison, who have become really incredible members of society today. And there's other people that aren't like that. I met a woman in Edinburgh, Pennsylvania, who went and visited the man who raped and killed her daughter, and forgave him. And she had years of anger and pain and resentment, and one day she woke up and she said, I'm tired of hating. I'm tired of living like this. I can't do it anymore. And she went down to the prison and she sat across from him and told him, I forgive you. And she said, he made up stuff and didn't own up to things. And she said it didn't matter. I just let him know I forgive him, and I forgave him. And her whole world completely changed. I mean, I said to her, this is a woman you want to sit next to at the table. She's love, she is awesome. And she lost, it's funny, she lost friends and family because they could not forgive her for forgiving him. Felt like it was a betrayal. But it totally shifted her life. She found her new spiritual path. She still visits him once in a while. And she's got inner peace in her heart, and a much more meaningful life today. Is when we forgive, it doesn't mean people aren't responsible for what they did, but it really liberates us from holding on to all that pain and suffering. We let go of it. So this goodwill, we want people to be well, and that means accountability too. They do their time, they learn their lessons. But maybe at some point after 11 or 12 years, maybe they're ready. I don't know. I don't know his particular case, but it's a good example to reflect on. So goodwill towards others. I want you to be happy and well. And then the third one is harmlessness. Harmlessness. So this is really where we don't want people to suffer, and we don't want to add to people or all living beings. In Buddhism, we're talking about all living beings, not just people. We don't want them to suffer. We want to live in a way that removes suffering. It's harmlessness. So this is compassion. Compassion is, I don't want you to suffer. I don't want to suffer. I don't want a living being. So if our motives now, our intention of living today with a way of seeing more clearly with renunciation, cultivating a wise understanding of the world that we live in, and being able to really show up in life the way I would like to, without being compelled by craving and aversion and desires, to show up in a way that's meaningful, with goodwill and with harmlessness. Now I have right view and right intention. Which brings us right into now my ethical behavior, which we're not going to have time for. Because we're at 4 minutes to 7. But we're close to there. So, but where this lays the groundwork is now, if I know this, I'm going to be able to create this really fertile ground. I think of my consciousness of this ground, this real fertile ground from which my spiritual path can grow. I can really till the soil, good nutrients around right speech, right action, right livelihood, from which I can really gain realization and understanding. So that's where our behaviors, our thoughts, our speech, and our behaviors. We've dealt with now the thoughts, right view, right intention. That's in the domain of mind. The ethical living and these 3 pieces are actions of our body and speech. So we often talk about body, speech, and mind. These 3 comprise the virtuous and wholesome activities that are the foundation of spiritual growth. So we've done the mind, and it looks like next year we'll do the body. Because next week is Christmas Eve, so we're going to take a break. And the following, New Year's Eve, we're going to do a very special Chenrei Sig purification practice here. So on New Year's Eve, we're going to invite everyone, if you would like to, it's the same time, 5:30 to 7, to bring some food. We'll have a special altar. We'll invite the Buddha of Compassion, Chenrei Sig, to become present. We'll make offerings. The food gets blessed during the ritual. And we'll do a Chenrei Sig sadhana, which cultivates merit, and then a visualization of purification to purify karmic imprints of body, speech, and mind. It's a really beautiful practice. And so we'll have the sadhanas here for you. And if you're online, you can watch it online, you can participate online, and you can go to our website and you can download the Chenrei Sig sadhana. I put it on the Chenrei Sig practice webpage. So even if you all can't make it here, you can download that. And that way we can, at the end of the year, really take a moment to purify our negative karmic imprints of body, speech, and mind, and have a good, fertile, fresh start. So from 5:30 to 7, and then afterward, with this blessed food, we can share a meal with each other if you'd like, and then you can go off to your other activities for New Year's Eve. But we do invite all of you online and here for that practice. It's the first thing I learned from my teacher. A really wonderful practice. And so that'll be New Year's Eve, and then first Wednesday in January we'll get back to the Eightfold Path, and we're on right view, we're on right speech, right action, right livelihood, the ethical foundation. So, any questions with what we've covered tonight? Yes?
Klesha.
Klesha. So karma and kleshas. Kleshas are mental afflictions. Mental afflictions. So a lot of mental afflictions, anger, resentment, jealousy, things of that nature can be called, afflictions. Afflictions of the mind. Kleshas. Karma and kleshas. Yeah. I'm going to just take one more drink and we'll... Okay, so before we do our little dedication, I also wanted to let people know we're doing so this is really growing. We've got a nice group here. We have groups that are growing online. So we're going to really look at starting January with a Way of Compassion Dharma Center and having a nice little Sangha that we hope to grow. And so really happy about that. And we'll talk more about that maybe New Year's. And some people have signed up to help with that if we'd like to grow it. And if you're online, have groups. There's groups already in other parts of the U.S. And feel free to get a group of friends. It's nice to practice as a group. And we can have little Sangha groups that we can grow. The piece with that, we also on Facebook, for those of you who do Facebook, started a little Way of Compassion Facebook group. And that way it's just, you know, if there's a quick notice that can go up, or if we can share things, just email us, and we'll invite you to do that if you'd like. All right, and Davi and Kent, who has been hosting us all year, just wanted to check in with Rita. I know she always has a lot of wonderful things in the back and activities. They just did the heart-centered holidays. Any big event that's coming up?
Solstice here Saturday evening in conjunction with the Two Rivers Unitarian Universalists. Starts at 6 o'clock, goes from about 6 to 8. There'll be pageantry and music and fire outside. That's going to be a happening event, so come, everybody come. And on Sunday evening at the community school, there are 9 yoga teachers who are going to teach through a series of 108 sun salutations, and its benefit to stop the sex trade of young women and young boys and girls around the globe. It's called Shine Your Light, and there's a flyer back there, and if you go to Dominic Kent Facebook page, you'll see information about it.
All right, that's great. Both of them this weekend. Okay. And yeah, we've got flyers for the Chenry Sig, and I think that's it.
The Mindful Life course.
And that's right. We're also going to start the new year off with the mindfulness course for those of you who would like to do that. That's through the Mindful Life program. That's the first weekend. And we have some online mindfulness courses for those people that would like to check that out online. That's mindfullifeprogram.org. All right. So are we ready to dedicate? No last minute dying question. Okay. So we've taken our time to really cultivate the conditions, not just for merit and wisdom that we've accumulated today. I really have been honored to be a part of this Sangha and the people that show up to create conditions that really help others and be of benefit. And it's really a blessing. You can see people doing wonderful things. So let's take a moment to dedicate the virtue and wisdom we've accumulated for the benefit of all beings. Let us dedicate the virtue and wisdom we've accumulated both here today and throughout our lives, both individually and collectively. We dedicate this for the benefit of all beings. May all beings be free of suffering and find lasting happiness. And may we be able to use the virtue and wisdom accumulated here today and throughout our lives to cultivate our own spiritual path, to purify our mind, to find liberation, so we can truly be of benefit to all living beings. Oh yeah. All right, thank you all so much. Always an honor. May be well, be happy, and stay out of trouble. And goodbye to all of you, and have a good evening.